Biden signs legislation to boost microchip production, raise investment in science. Grand jury declines to indict woman in Emmett Till killing. Mohamed close to becoming first black woman to serve in Minnesota Senate. 50 Palestinians thrown out of Israeli bus after Jewish settlers refused to travel with non-Jews. Malaysia's champion Christian athlete defends hijab. Taiwan showcases expertise in halal and plant-based food. From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top stories tonight. On Tuesday, U.S. President Joe Biden signed into law Bipartisan CHIPS and Science Act. This legislation aims to bolster U.S. chip manufacturing in a bid to counter China. It sets aside $52.7 billion to increase production of American-made semiconductors. Biden said that the U.S. had a share of 40% in global chip production over 30 years ago, before American manufacturing hollowed out. This new act will also address supply chain vulnerabilities by producing more goods in the U.S., bolstering domestic scientific research, and strengthening economic and national security. Biden said that the U.S. and the world are facing an inflection point in economy and technology. He also stressed how America is about possibilities and called the act a once-in-a-generation event. On Monday, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security said it will phase out former President Donald Trump's contentious Remain in Mexico policy. That rule required eligible asylum seekers who feared for their lives to return to Mexico to await their asylum hearing in U.S. immigration courts. The new decision would allow asylum seekers to cross the border on the day of their hearings and stay in the U.S. while awaiting an outcome. The announcement came after the U.S. District Court's decision to lift the injunction that required DHS to re-implement the Trump-era protocol in good faith. The Justice Department on Thursday moved to unseal a warrant authorizing a search of former President Trump's Mar-A-Lago estate this week, following escalating demands for answers about the unprecedented investigation. According to Justice Department's court filings, the public's clear and powerful interest in understanding what occurred under these circumstances weighs heavily in favoring of unsealing. Meanwhile, an FBI building was attacked in Cincinnati. The suspects allegedly brandished multiple weapons in the attack before leading FBI officials on a car chase. A Mississippi grand jury has declined to indict the white woman whose accusation led to the kidnapping, torture, and lynching of 14-year-old Emmett Till in 1955. The decision likely closes the case that shocked the nation and galvanized the modern civil rights movement. A Leflore County grand jury last week heard more than 7 hours of testimony from investigators and witnesses. The jury determined there was insufficient evidence to indict Carolyn Bryant Donham on charges of kidnapping and manslaughter. An unserved arrest warrant from the time of the crime that was found in the basement of the Leflore County Courthouse for Donham, her husband Roy Bryant, and his half-brother J.W. Millam triggered the grand jury investigation. Bryant and Millam, who are now both deceased, were acquitted of murder charges by an all-white jury in 1955. Donham, who was 21 years old at that time, was never taken into custody. Zainab Mohamed is a step closer to becoming the first black woman and the youngest person to serve in the Minnesota State Senate. Mohamed won against challenger Todd Scott in Tuesday's Democratic primary. The 25-year-old from Minneapolis earned more than 67% of the vote. Mohamed said that she ran for office to make people's lives easier, not harder. She's a policy aide for the Minneapolis City Council member Jason Chavez. She's also served as a community advocacy manager for the Minnesota chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Mohamed will face Republican Sean Holster in the November general election. On Wednesday, Yaser Abdul Saeed was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in Dallas after being found guilty in the 2008 killings of his two daughters. On New Year's Day, Saeed took his two daughters, 18-year-old Amina and 17-year-old Sarah, for a ride in his taxi. Hours later, the girls' bodies were found with multiple gunshot wounds in Saeed's abandoned cab, authorities said. Before she died, Sarah made a brief, desperate plea for help. By the time the police found the cab, the sisters were dead. Saeed had disappeared along with his handgun and all of his savings, CNN reported. Saeed was a fugitive for more than 12 years, with 6 of those years being on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitive list. On Wednesday, several Pennsylvania doctors joined Democratic Senate candidate Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman in warning against electing Dr. Mehmet Oz to the U.S. Senate. They cited Oz's spreading of COVID-19 misinformation and history of dispensing what one study found to be baseless medical advice as reasons. Oz, a retired heart surgeon, is the only person of Muslim background running on a GOP ticket. If elected, he will be the first Muslim in the Senate. The statewide Real Doctors Against Oz campaign claims he's not a real doctor. The campaign denounced Oz's history of peddling debunked supplements, dangerous fad diets, and fake miracle cures. His financial ties to the pharmaceutical industry and support for Republican efforts to ban abortion in Pennsylvania endanger the lives of women, the campaign said. Palestinian workers were expelled from a bus in Tel Aviv. Details after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Assalamu alaikum! Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever-popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. On Thursday, about 50 Palestinian workers were expelled from a bus in Tel Aviv after Jewish passengers refused to travel with non-Jews. It is the latest of many racist incidents highlighting Israel's apartheid system. The incident happened on a bus traveling from the Israeli capital to the Bnei Brak area inside Israel. Eyewitnesses reported that when the bus stopped in Bnei Brak, 3 Jewish passengers refused to travel with the Palestinians. They demanded the driver force the non-Jewish passengers off the bus. The company operating the bus route rejected the claim that it practices discrimination. Under Israeli law, transport operators are not allowed to operate segregated services. However, apartheid is rife in the nation. Last year, Human Rights Watch released a 213-page report that found Israeli authorities are committing crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution against Palestinians. On Wednesday, a senior police official said 2 Rohingya refugee leaders were killed in a crowded Bangladeshi refugee camp, causing panic amongst the displaced community. Abu Talib, head of a camp in the Ukiya sub-district, and Sayyid Hussein, also from the same camp in the border district of Cox's Bazar, were killed Tuesday night, police said. Kamran Hussein is an additional superintendent of the Armed Police Battalion in Ukiya. He told Anadolu agency the killing seemed to be targeted homicides motivated by personal animosity. According to media reports, nearly 100 murders have been reported in these camps. On Tuesday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan hosted leaders and ministers in the central Konya province for the opening ceremony of the 5th Islamic Solidarity Games. The Games will continue through August 18th with more than 4,000 athletes from 56 countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, participating. The OIC is the world's second largest intergovernmental organization after the United Nations. Its members are 57 Muslim-majority states covering 4 continents. Attendees include Erdogan's Azerbaijani counterpart, Ilham Aliyev, President of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, Ersin Tatar, and the Palestinian Prime Minister Mohamed Shatayyeh. Also present were Algerian Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman and Saudi Sports Minister Prince Abdul Aziz bin Turki Al Faisal Al Saud. Prince Abdul Aziz also is serving as the president of the Islamic Solidarity Sports Federation. Erdogan held separate closed-door meetings with Aliyev, Al Faisal bin Abdurrahman, and Shatayyeh. Taiwan is getting more halal ready to cater to the increasing Muslim population in Malaysia and globally. The move is prompted by the rising demand for halal food and Muslims' concerns about hygiene and quality. James Chang, director of the Economic Division of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Malaysia, said plant-based products have gained popularity in recent years. Consumers increasingly prefer healthy and environmentally friendly foods, he said. Taiwan has emerged as the second friendliest global destination for Muslim travelers. It has long been a leader in plant-based meat production, worth $7.9 billion in 2022 and projected to reach $15.7 billion by 2027. Chang said that the halal food market is expected to reach more than $3 trillion by 2028. The Shariah-compliant Islamic coin secured $200 million during a private sale from international private buyers. The cryptocurrency network, which promotes an ethics-first policy, is targeting the world's 1.8 billion Muslim population. It has become the top private sale raise in 2022 and the top 10 raise in history. The digital currency has a fatwa issued by the world's leading experts in Sharia law. Sheikh Dr. Nizam Mohamed Saleh Yaqoubi, recognized as the gatekeeper of a $2 trillion market for Islamic financial products, spearheaded the edict. The Islamic Coin team includes leading traditional and Islamic finance experts. Among them are Peter Rafferty, former manager of the $600 billion portfolio at the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, and Khamis Budarouni Al-Shamsi, former head of the bank's inspection team at the Central Bank of the UAE. A Christian gold medalist athlete in Malaysia is defending her decision to wear tudung, a traditional hijab-like headscarf of Malay Muslim women. 21-year-old Mariwati Manuel from Caningua in Sabah State clinched a gold medal during the 2022 World Peking Silat Championship held in July at Melaka of Malaysia. Silat is a collective term for a class of indigenous martial arts in Southeast Asia. Following her victory, Manuel faced questions about her choice to wear tudung during competition. She belongs to the ethnic Murut community. In an August 7th Facebook post, Manuel said she wears tudung as a form of respect for Malay culture and heritage. Manuel said she had been studying and practicing Malay heritage and felt compelled to do what she thought she had learned. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages with Edward Ahmed Mitchell.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school, because this may be the last time I'll have lunch, till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs,
and that's still not enough to put food on the table.
I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back. To discuss the key takeaways from the Inflation Reduction Act, let's go to Edward Ahmed Mitchell. Over to you, Edward.
Thank you, Hena. And now we'd like to discuss legislation that is quickly moving through Congress, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. This is supported by President Biden and apparently all Democrats in Congress, and is expected to head to his desk for signature soon. What is in this bill? What would it mean for the American economy and maybe even global economies? We wanted to learn more about that. And so we're very happy to welcome back our special guest, Dr. Fadhel Kaboub, who is, as many of you know, an associate professor of economics at Denouncing, and he's the president of the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity. We're always happy to get his insight on these issues. Assalamu alaikum, doctor. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Alhamdulillah. Thanks for coming back. So let's dive right in. Bismillah. The bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, what is in it? What are some of the main highlights of it? What do its sponsors say it is meant to do?
Well, the official name, as you stated, is the Inflation Reduction Act. But as many of you know, this is what's left of the Build Back Better Act, which was essentially eliminated over the last several months by Senator Joe Manchin, pretty much, and a handful of other senators who are concerned about how large the Build Back Better bill was. $3.5 trillion worth of spending over the next 10 years. So we end up with a much, much smaller version of that, very limited, but repackaged as an anti-inflation bill that is designed, according to its sponsors, to reduce inflation, but most importantly for them, reduce the deficit, raise taxes over the next few years, but at the same time address some of the energy and climate issues that have been on everybody's mind lately. Address a little bit of the inflation related to healthcare costs, especially the pharmaceuticals aspect of it, by allowing the government to negotiate lower drug prices for some key prescriptions. And that's essentially what we ended up with the 50-50 split Senate, with the vice president casting the final vote, the 51st vote, to get this bill through the Senate. And it looks like President Biden is about to sign it in the next few days.
Thank you for that summary, Doctor. Let me ask you this. Does the name Inflation Reduction Act make sense? Is that the primary purpose of this bill? Is that what the bill's primary impact will be in your estimation?
Not in the immediate term, but in the long term, potentially, to some extent. And here's what I mean by that. For example, a lot of the concern about inflation is energy cost, gas prices. And switching to electric vehicles is supposed to help relieve some of the burden, financial burden on middle class, working class families, and so on. When it comes to the actual implementation, it looks like this switch from combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles is not going to happen immediately, because the tax credits, the incentive to purchase new electric vehicles, is not going to be as big as most people expect, because of the specific requirements that are included in this bill, which require that the significant portion of the vehicles and the batteries, the most expensive component of the electric vehicles, be made in North America. And at this point, the vast majority of electric vehicles, that is more than 70% of electric vehicles, would not qualify for this. So anybody thinking about buying an electric vehicle and hoping for the $7,500 tax credit, they need to double check what they're buying, and that would eliminate quite a few of the potential purchases. In the long term, though, a lot of the producers are planning to invest in production units here in the United States, which will create jobs here, which will boost production of electric vehicles, but that's not going to happen overnight. We're talking about 5 to 10 years. So on that front, inflation reduction, not really. On the drug prices, for example, allowing Medicare, the government, to negotiate lower drug prices for a handful of major drugs with major pharmaceuticals also is not happening immediately. We're looking at the next 2 to 3 years for some of these negotiations to start. So the impact on the main drivers of inflation, which pre-pandemic in the US were healthcare costs, including prescription costs, energy, transportation, higher education, all of these major drivers of inflation are either not in the Inflation Reduction Act, like education, or not going to be kind of felt by consumers for several years to come. So it's a misnomer, but for the sponsors, for the supporters of this act, they don't think of these drivers of inflation as the real source of inflation. Unfortunately, they think of the deficit, the government deficit, as the major source of inflation. So that's why they emphasized in this bill the fact that this bill is going to raise a substantial amount of taxes and is going to substantially reduce the deficit. The deficit is already shrinking as we speak, even before this. And unfortunately, that's the wrong assumption, assuming that the federal government spending on infrastructure, on vital services during this recovery, the pandemic recovery, is what caused the inflation that we're experiencing right now.
What do you think is the problem? Was it the supply chain crisis? Was it giving out too much money to big businesses and corporations? What do you think was the main driver of inflation over the past year or so?
So to understand the drivers of inflation, we have to go pre-pandemic and then look at the pandemic effect, and then look at what happened since the Ukraine conflict started a few months ago. Pre-pandemic, we had 4 major drivers of inflation in the US: real estate, energy and transportation, healthcare, and higher education. So those drivers of inflation are alive and well. This Inflation Reduction Act will partially address the prescription drug aspect to it, not immediately, but eventually. Will partially address the energy and transportation aspect on a very small scale, given the extent of the problem that we're dealing with in the US. But it certainly does not address the broader healthcare issues, the broader housing and real estate inflation pressure points, and it doesn't address higher education, the cost of education. So those will remain. But after the pandemic, we had supply chain disruptions that affected the global economy and added new inflation pressure points for us here in the United States. The Inflation Reduction Act will not immediately address any of those issues. In the long term, yes, it will address some of them by investing in more local production of components of electric vehicles and so on. So we'll see the effect eventually. And then you have the Ukraine crisis, which affected energy prices globally and affected also the supply of key minerals for the global economy. So again, these existing inflation pressure points will not be eliminated by this bill, maybe will be eliminated by some diplomatic solution to the conflict eventually. So we have to understand that, the expectation that passing this bill in the next few days, all of a sudden inflation pressure points will be relieved, is not necessarily going to be the case.
Not a magic wand, so to speak.
Exactly.
So let me ask you this: what do you think is missing from this bill? If in a hypothetical world they had the votes to add more to this bill, what do you think should have been added to make it more effective in the short term and the long term? Whether that's on the economy, climate, healthcare, what do you think was missing from this bill? What are some of the major things that weren't included that you think maybe should have been included?
Well, even if we stayed within the parameters of the bill as is, one of the things that would have been helpful is some transition period, especially to encourage the purchase of electric vehicles and transition to renewable energy-based transportation. Not giving manufacturers enough time to relocate their units here in the US before consumers can actually take advantage of the tax credits to buy electric vehicles, that's just not reasonable. So small adjustments without any substantial cost could have been introduced in this bill. But on a broader basis, if we had the votes, if we had a much more ambitious Congress, we'd have invested in public transportation. That would be a huge reduction in CO2 emissions that will transform the way we consume transportation, so to speak. Instead, we stuck with, everyone get your own car and buy your own means of transportation instead of, investing in public transportation. On the education front, there's no, what we lost from the Build Back Better Act is huge in terms of investing in education, investing in childcare, which is a huge component of bringing people into the labor force, neglected communities into the labor force. That is a huge weakness that remains in the U.S. economy, that we have millions of people who are of working age, who have skills, who want to contribute, who want to work, but can't participate because the pay is too low, because the pay doesn't include benefits for childcare or elder care or transportation. These are the structural issues that were completely dismissed in this bill. And primarily because we had individuals in the Senate who said the spending is too high and that the spending itself will cause more inflation, when we know this specific targeted spending would actually reduce inflation and help us bring more people into the workforce and help us fuel this recovery as opposed to slow down and potentially kill this recovery with this massive deficit reduction that we're already experiencing, and we're about to experience even more with this Inflation Reduction Act that could have been labeled the Deficit Reduction Act.
Understood. Well, Doctor, that's all very helpful and informative. We want to thank you for your insight on this. And obviously the bill, if it is signed as we expect it will be, will be taking effect over a long period of time. So we look forward to having you back to, God willing, to discuss some of the concrete impact, if any, that it has in our country. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaboub, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And we'll send it back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Edward. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube and Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.